Hi, this is Greg, and welcome to the Leadership Excellence channel. Today, I'm offering you part 2 of the 12 principles of personal leadership. I put a link to part 1 down in the comments section below, along with a few other videos on the topic of personal leadership development. In this video, I share with you a pre-recorded webinar I gave to some clients a few years ago. All of the principles are taken from this book, and that is Making Life's Puzzle Pieces Fit, using the 12 principles of personal leadership. It's available on Amazon.com. So here is part 2. Feel free to share your comments below, and I hope you find it to be both beneficial and enlightening.
Then we will review our previous assignments, including a couple portions of the personal mission statement that we had. We'll have a class question. We will be discussing 3 more principles today: a life in balance, simple diversions, meaningful relationships, and then we will have our closing comments. As always, here's how to get the most from the program. Prepare in advance for each class. Complete any assignments given and review the materials. Actively participate in the webinars. Avoid distractions and doing other work at the same time. And certainly respect the opinions and ideas of others. Learn, engage, and have some fun. So here's our icebreaker today. I want you to take about 20 to 30 seconds on a piece of paper. I want you to draw a traffic yield sign. And as you draw that traffic yield sign, I want you to write down what shape it is, of course. I would like you to write down what color a traffic yield sign is. Is there writing on the sign, and what color is the writing? So this is our icebreaker today. Take a few seconds to draw a traffic yield sign. And would anyone like to volunteer on what they wrote down? What do you have so far? Anyone?
Greg, I will.
Okay.
Debbie?
Yes, Debbie.
I do believe the traffic yield sign is yellow. This is the triangle.
Okay. All right. Is there any writing? Can you picture any writing on the sign?
Yes. Yield.
Okay. That's pretty safe, I guess, right?
My own thing in there.
There you go. Okay. Well, good. Any other comments on a traffic yield sign?
Greg, this is Renee. I think sometimes the yield sign is also red and white.
Also red and white. Okay. All right. And I assume that it would also say yield. And
Correct.
What color would the word yield be?
Probably black or red, I would guess.
Okay. Well, we had some interesting comments, because if you go through the history of the United States and you drive around the small rural roads, as I have oftentimes in my career, and on the major highways, you will see lots of different types of yield signs. But the interesting thing is that beginning in 1971, that's a long time ago, all yield signs were changed from yellow with black text to a white background with red trim and red text, just like we see in that picture there. Now, this is a lesson about observation, because we condition ourselves to see things in certain ways, and when things change, sometimes a long time ago, when things change, we don't always notice. So our minds have a way of grasping onto a certain amount of knowledge at one time in life, and oftentimes we do not change with the times and perceive that things are changing. And that's a lesson about observation. I would bet that 60 to 70% of the folks that I asked this icebreaker to say that the yield sign is yellow, because as many of us were going back many years, and I'm sure on some rural roads there are certainly some old yellow yield signs left, but we tend to think of the first yield signs that we saw as children and remember them because of their color and because of the black text on those signs that said yield. So again, this is a lesson about observation and being open and changing with the times rather than just being conditioned. So let's review what personal leadership is. Personal leadership is you choose to seize control of your own life and path, knowing that there is a default mission statement for you that takes over if you don't have one yourself. You create a game plan for life, and that game plan is a mission statement that you create yourself, and then you build active goals to achieve that mission statement. We have reviewed principle number 1, which was the right visionary goals. We saw that written goals are necessary to provide a blueprint for our future. They're like the seeds. Goals are the seeds. Writing it down is like the earth. And if we don't write down our goals, they really have no meaning to us. Nothing can grow from it. We saw that short-term goals are the stepping stones to achieving long-term goals, and that's true whether it's our personal lives or a business plan. We reviewed that vision is a mental picture that prods and it inspires and motivates us. It's a snapshot of something that we desire, a change, a desired future that we want to be part of. We saw that creating positive affirmations is a form of vision and something that we should exercise every day. We saw that a personal mission statement includes 4 main parts. Last time I actually had some samples of the moral and ethical values some of you wrote, and personal family goals, and a little bit later on we will be looking at the 3rd and 4th section, personal career goals and personal life goals. Principle number 2 was about continuous education. We were reminded that it gives us the knowledge and wisdom to reach our goals. It helps us to prepare for achievement. We understood that sometimes a good education is a requirement to attain credibility or credentials for certain careers and professions. And once we've achieved our goals, it can help us to maintain our accomplishments. So achieving a goal is one thing, maintaining it is another, and education, wisdom, helps us to do that. A complete education develops our minds, our bodies, and our personality. It makes life more fulfilling and rewarding. And it guides us to be proactive and to form our own opinions and values rather than just what we hear from the talking heads in the media. Principle number 3 was maintaining our health. We discovered, of course, that whatever our health is, that we have an obligation to take care of whatever we have been given. Eat a healthy diet primarily composed of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. It's good to have a regular exercise routine that strengthens our cardiovascular system, our bones and muscles. Of course, get a doctor's approval before beginning any exercise routine. Drinking lots of water, getting enough sleep and rest, because it indeed is a shame to do so many other things to have a fulfilling life and to see it all slip away because we did not take care of our health. Principle number 4 was driving forward. We learned that a principle or a personal vision fuels drive. It inspires us, it motivates us, and it gives us a forward momentum, a determination to go over, under, around, or through obstacles, but by all means keep going forward. It's the ability to push yourself through difficult situations, to wind our own clock, so to speak. It's an example that inspires others to join your cause, whether you're a parent or a supervisor, whatever your role may be in life. And driving forward is not constantly looking into the past to relive negative events or experiences. When we do that, that only freezes us, it only locks us into reliving the past over and over again, and we are unable to drive forward. Principle number 5 was utilizing our resources. We discussed some ways to do that. Mental agility, using our imagination and creativity, of which many of us lost much of it when we grew into adulthood, unfortunately. Developing out-of-the-box thinking, asking questions we don't normally ask, being open-minded to new information and not just accepting the first thing we hear. We talked about physical resources, energy, which of course is a byproduct of good health, getting a lot of rest and sleep and managing our stress, the ability to respond quickly to situations. Physical resources include learning technological tools taking the time to study history, to learn from the lessons of history, doing physical research. We also talked about the importance of a good network, a network of friends, former co-workers, a mentor, business groups, people who have knowledge in areas that we don't have knowledge. We talked about learning to rely on a personal strength as far as tapping into our own resources. If our strength is either being analytical, or maybe we're exceedingly personable or inquisitive or detail-oriented, whatever those strengths are, to use those strengths as a resource, but also to realize that we can use a weakness. We can leverage a weakness. If we have a humble, self-depreciating attitude and have an approach with humor about our weaknesses, we often can leverage that to get help and to get people to work with us in order to use them as a resource to solve difficult problems. And then we talked about the importance of eventually making a decision and not being frozen into indecision, which is a problem many people struggle with, particularly those who suffer from procrastination. They want to make a decision at the very last minute. And unfortunately, when we do that, that doesn't leave us much wiggle room in case the decision is a wrong decision. So it's not good to have indecision. It's not good to hold off a decision until the last possible second. Principle number 6 with dealing with disappointments, something we all experience. It's a natural cycle of being human. Everyone experiences disappointment. And when that occurs, it's a good time to review our mission statement, because if we wrote it well, it will help us to get through those difficult period of time. It will remind us, according to our own words, of where we're coming from and what we value and what's important in life, and it'll help us during those difficult times. Often when we're disappointed, we just assume that the feelings we have will last forever, and they should depart in a few days. If they're ongoing, if a deep depression occurs for more than a couple of weeks, or a feeling of despondency, then I certainly encourage you to seek professional medical treatment. There are herbs, and if need be, there are some medicines that are available to help one who is struggling with deep or constant depression. We saw that time has a way of turning a lot of perceived failures into successes in life. And that's why we should take a long-term perspective on events that occur to us, not just looking at today, not viewing things only from right now, because right now is an incomplete and it's a distorted view of your life and who and what you are. We saw that disappointments and learning to deal with them and personal struggle, overcoming self-doubt, is a fertilizer of achievement. I don't have the time today, but I could list to you a number of people who went through some very deep and dark valleys in their lives just before they had major breakthroughs of achievement in their lives. They almost entered like a wilderness just before very significant and important things happened in their lives. When we're going through discouragement, take a mental break for a few days, do some things you usually enjoy, that'll help, and certainly do something good and positive for another person. It helps us to get our minds off of ourselves. Now let's take a look at our previous assignment. We were continuing to work on our personal mission statement. And I had sent you some examples. This time we're looking at 2 areas, the final 2 areas of the personal mission statement, which are the career goals and personal life goals. Let's see what we've created. Let's begin with the career goals. Do we have any volunteers of someone who would like to tell us what you wrote down? You don't all have to speak up at once.
Hi, this is Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Start. You're welcome. For my career goals and mission, I put I vision a career path for myself where I'm demonstrating leadership by setting examples of good working ethics. I want to be someone who my coworkers can rely on and can come to me anytime. I want to continue to learn new skills. I want to have confidence in myself. And I must remember that criticism is a learning tool and opportunities are never lost. Someone always takes the ones you missed.
Wow, that's very good. You obviously gave that a lot of thought.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, who else would like to give us an idea of what they wrote down for career goals? Don't be shy.
This is Kelly.
Yes, Kelly, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. What did you write down, Kelly?
I desire a career path that allows me to use my current knowledge and continues to educate me so that I may help my clients improve their financial goals and to motivate my fellow employees to be the best that they can be.
Good. I like that. It's very outward looking, and it covers both your clients, serving your clients, and serving your fellow coworkers. So that's excellent. Very good. Thank you for that. Anyone else like to comment on what they wrote down for their career goals? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Why don't we move into the next area, personal life goals. These are always interesting, because they reveal things about us that others may not know. So who would like to step out and tell us what your personal life goals are?
Greg, this is Renee, and I'll share mine.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, go ahead.
I strive for a life in balance with the primary focus of nurturing relationships, seeing the good in others, and focusing time and efforts daily to genuinely care for others. I will take care of my health through exercise, eating healthy, medical care, and making time for recreation. I will prioritize continuing education. I will make time to enjoy travel. I will strive to smile more, criticize less, and enjoy each day for the gift it is.
Wow, that also is very good. You covered a lot of areas there and obviously gave it a lot of thought. I like to comment about smiling more and looking at each life as a gift, or each day as a gift, because indeed life is a gift and each day is absolutely a gift. So very good. Thank you for that. Outstanding. Anyone else like to volunteer their personal life goal? I think we have time for one more. It's silent. Okay. Well, if you're uncomfortable with that, I understand. That's fine. Why don't we go ahead and move on a little bit, and let's ask a class question to get everybody a little more involved. And here is the class question. What was the most valuable idea or concept you gleaned from chapters 7 through 9, that's what you just read for this particular webinar, of making life's puzzle pieces fit, and how can you apply that lesson to your life or business? Who would like to comment on the class question?
This is Mary. Well, either one.
Okay, let's start out with Mary and then the other comment. Go ahead.
Just simply, when I was reading through, I have this circled, and it was in chapter 7, and it talked about the blue screen of death, and it just struck me as funny because we were having some computer problems at home, and that had come up, and I had never heard it before, and then hearing it again in your book, it just struck me funny.
Well, I think there's really a great analogy there, especially with the Microsoft operating system, and that is it really does have limited resources, and if you open up 10 programs, and I often do that during the course of a day, and you're minimizing most of them, but you're working on some, eventually when you use up all the resources that your RAM has, that your memory has, there's a good chance that you are going to freeze the operating system and see that terrible blue screen of death. I know it's happened to me a lot of times. So I think it's a very good analogy. And what happens in life when we stretch ourselves too thin, when we forget that our personal resources are also limited, and we try to do too many things, and the result usually is not a positive one. Okay, we had someone else volunteer to answer this question.
Yeah, Greg, that was Renee.
Okay, Renee, go ahead.
It's the same principle for me. The life and balance piece was the kind of the light bulb moment for me as reading this. In my life right now, I have 2 middle school age kids. Life is really busy, and I feel like, on the surface I'm doing good with things. I'm doing good at work, working really hard.
Right.
sort of realized that I'm working hard, but maybe on the wrong things.
There you go.
I'm sort of missing that balance piece. At home, I'm just trying to get stuff done. If we don't have food to eat, that's a bad thing. So obviously I go
Yeah, especially if you have teenagers. Kind of sure if you don't have food at home, that's a bad thing.
Exactly. But it really helped me to realize that I really need to put life in better balance, and I need to prioritize those relationships. And a good example was this weekend. We still had a busy weekend like we always do with sports and activities and homework. And I just took the time every so often to say, hey, let's take a break. And we played ping pong and silly little stuff at home. But it was the most enjoyable time that I've had in a really long time to just prioritize some of those other things.
Right. Well, that's great. And remember, I think it was webinar number 1 where we talked about hippos and lipos. Hippos, of course, are high importance payoff activities. Those are things that are related, directly related to our goals. Those are things that are so important to us that can't be delegated. And those are things usually that take investment in our time. But on the other hand, all of us also have a lot of lipos that we've inherited over the years. That's low important payoff activities, and those tend to be rather trivial. Sometimes we do it as a form of obligation or habit, but they really have nothing to do with our goals. They're oftentimes things that can be delegated or totally eliminated from our lives. So I always encourage folks that are in your situation where they've just got a lot going on is take a look at your life, and you may have some lipos, some things that you began doing a number of years ago that you've grown and matured and no longer have any meaning to you. Oftentimes people join clubs, for example, and they go to meetings every Wednesday night or whatever, and they've really long outgrown their enthusiasm or the need to be in that particular club, but they continue to do it out of a sense of obligation or out of a sense of habit. So it's a good thing to take a look at our lives, especially this time of year that we're entering. Springtime is a season of new growth, so it's always a good time to take a look at what we're doing and see if we can make our lives a little more fulfilling and a little more productive. Does anyone else would like to comment on this class question at all?
Hi, this is Kelly.
Yes, Kelly.
The section in principle number 6, time can turn failure into success. I'm a big gardener, so the fact that remembering that seeds sprout underground before you can see them really hit home for me, and that I can relate to that in my personal life, just not in addition to when I'm outside working in the yard, that other things. There needs to be roots take place before you may actually see them.
That's right. Have you ever heard of anything called a Chinese bamboo plant? The Chinese bamboo plant, for like the first 4 years, grows like an inch a year. But the 5th year, it takes off and grows like 12 feet the 5th year. And what was occurring is during the first 4 years, it was building an underground root structure to support its tremendous growth that would occur on the 5th year. So our lives a lot of times are like that. There's a lot going on the inside, hopefully growth and a new foundation and deeper roots regarding our values and our goals and where we want to go. But on the outside, sometimes you see very little growth until the time is right. But if you did the right job and established the right roots and the right foundation, then when that time comes for you to just blossom or bloom, you'll be ready and you'll be able to support that additional level of growth. So gardening is an outstanding analogy. I'm a member of the American Rose Society myself, so I just absolutely love to garden. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else want to comment on this class question? Okay, we will move on at this point then. All of you received the Circle of Life. Do you remember that? Hopefully you all filled out the Circle of Life. You took a look at those 8 areas, and on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the closest, or what you might say the weakest, at the center of the bullseye, 10 being maximum, you were asked to go around those 10 areas and rate yourself from 1 to 10 in your present level of fulfillment or achieve what you've achieved in life. And what we'd like you to do, of course, is once you've plotted all of those in those 8 areas, is to connect it together. You might want to try to make it as round as you can from one spoke to another. And the reason I ask you to do this is it'll tell you a little bit about your present situation in life regarding these 8 major areas. Would someone like to volunteer to me what one of your strengths were? Debbie? Debbie, can you tell us what one of your strengths were?
Which Debbie would you like?
Debbie Van Sutter.
Van Scoter.
Yes, Van Scoter,
Yes,
thank
that's
you.
me. Yes, no problem. One of my strengths would be family and home.
Great, excellent. That's a good one to have. Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to volunteer what they saw one of their strengths? How about Debbie Ray?
Sure, one of mine was family and home as well.
Okay, good. Both excellent ones to have. Very good. Well, the lesson here is the question, how rounded is your circle? And the reason that is asked is picture your circle like a tire on a car or on an automobile. And what happens to an automobile tire, what happens to any wheel if it is unbalanced? Well, what happens is over a period of time, if it's unbalanced, eventually that creates stress and that creates heat. And as someone can tell you who drives a wheel that is unbalanced at fast speeds on a highway for a period of time, you can even eventually have a blowout. So what the circle of life can help you to do is look at the areas that you're weak. Look at the areas that are flattening your tire where there is not balance, and give them some time and resources. One of your assignments today will be to create a goal, your first goal to support your personal mission statement. And you may look at your circle of life and you may see an area in one of those 8 categories that you need to develop, that you need to spend more time with to give your life balance. So the rounder the circle, the better. A lack of balance in life creates stress, it creates heat, problems, anxiety, frustration. So look at the areas which are weak and give them some time and some additional resources to grow them. And perhaps, again, establish some personal goals to create more balance in your life. So that's the purpose of that exercise. Now let's begin talking about principle number 7 that we will discuss in more detail today. Principle number 7 is a life in balance. I just love the way that Encarta Dictionary defined balance. Here's what it says. A state in which various elements form a satisfying and harmonious whole, and nothing is out of proportion or unduly emphasized at the expense of the rest. Now that's a beautiful definition of a life in balance as well, meaning that things in our lives are harmonious, things, various elements, various talents, various needs in our lives are all satisfying. They're working together as a whole, and nothing is distorted or nothing is out of proportion or unduly emphasized at the expense of the rest of our life. I think that's a very good definition. A life unbalanced, unfortunately, causes a lot of problems. A life is unbalanced when we nurture and tolerate our own destructive addictions. And there are a lot of different types of addictions. I always encourage people to avoid all substance abuse issues, because anything that controls us is taking away from our ability to grow. Something as simple as cigarette smoking, obviously more serious issues like alcoholism or drugs or other types of substances. I encourage people to avoid all substance abuse. I know a lot of companies today will even pay for people, for example, to go through smoking cessation programs. Smoking is harmful to us and our health, and of course one of the principles was health. And in this principle, it's just an addiction. I may have mentioned in the book about how stunned I've been over the years to speak in front of a group or come out of a meeting after an hour and see people just fleeing out of there, their hands shaking. The first thing they have to do is run outside and smoke a cigarette because because frankly they're addicted to nicotine. And that's not a good thing. So avoid all types of substance abuse in your life. Obsessions are where we spend too much time and thought on any one thing. A lot of people have various obsessions. Some of them are physical, some of them are mental obsessions, and obviously that leads to unbalance in our lives. The problem with having a life that's unbalanced is we become unstable, and that instability, at first we recognize it and we say to ourselves, something's wrong here. But if we don't make an effort to change it, that instability very quickly becomes our accepted norm. We get used to it, and we think that it always has to be this way, or that it always will be this way, and it doesn't always have to be that way. So the instability in an unbalanced life just becomes normal to us, and that's a difficulty, because when something becomes normal to you, you usually lose the desire to find balance. You'll lose the desire to overcome and to work on that problem that you have, whether it's emotional or physical, a physical addiction or whatever it may be. Again, I want to emphasize that we have finite, limited human resources, and we have to use those wisely and effectively. We talked earlier about the blue screen of death. And when any one area of our life is taking a huge amount of our emotional or our physical human resources in order to feed that particular obsession or addiction, then we are setting ourselves up for some serious problems somewhere along the line. So there's got to be a balance. We saw a couple of weeks ago a very gifted and talented person, Whitney Houston, a young woman, died tragically because she had addictions in her life. She had destructive behaviors. She had toxic human relationships, and we'll be talking about that in a minute with meaningful relationships. But here was someone with incredible gift of singing, just wonderful potential, and a young person, had her whole life ahead of her, could have yet done so many great and wonderful things. But because her life was unbalanced, her life ended unnaturally early. And that's very sad. Very sad for her family, very sad for her loved ones, those who knew her friends, and that's a terrible thing. So now we'll go into principle number 8, which is also very important, and this is part of providing balance in life. And principle number 8 are simple diversions. The truth is, particularly in our American culture, is that we are the descendants of Puritans, and the Puritans believed that work is salvation. And we Americans, compared to our European counterparts in many other areas of the world, we work hard, and that's a good thing, but sometimes it borders on being a workaholic. The human mind needs recreation. Recreation you can also pronounce recreation. And it needs it on an ongoing, regular basis. And if we're just working, and we become so busy achieving and working, we forget to stop and enjoy life and savor it a little bit and walk through the rose garden and read that book we wanted to read and spend some additional time with loved ones. If we get so wrapped up in one thing, that is very destructive. Recent research on the human mind shows that the human mind dreams virtually every night. Now, we don't remember it. It usually takes something kind of extraordinary for us to remember a dream. Most people don't remember the majority of their dreams. Some people I've talked to might remember a dream once a month. Some recall their dreams more. But according to recent research in the human brain, the human mind is not idle at night. The human mind basically plays a movie while we're in deep sleep. and it rehearses the input that we received during the day, and it decides what is worth keeping and filing and what was trivial and is not worth filing. And then it also goes into a period of recreation. It goes into a period of fantasy. It goes into a period of play. And I'm sure we've all woken up from dreams and we say, boy, where did that come from? My loved one from the past was alive and I was talking to him or her in the dream, or I was doing something that I haven't done in years. Well, that is the human mind recreating itself, refreshing itself through a very important process of our physiology that we call sleep. So don't become so busy achieving that you forget to stop and enjoy life. And simple diversions should be positive periods of time in which we take time out to enjoy life, and they should be in harmony with our values and with our morals. And we need to experience these diversions daily and weekly, not just reserve it for exclusively one day of the week, to live for the weekend, so to speak. But we need to discipline ourselves to experience minor diversions every day. If you have a break during the day, then get your cup of coffee at 10 o'clock or whenever your break is and go and look out the window. Take a look at the birds walking outside or the traffic going by. Take and use those simple little diversions even throughout the day to refresh your thinking, to refresh your mind. Take your scheduled breaks and vacations. That's very important. Studies show that recreation reduces a major cause of many health problems, and that is stress. Stress is more of a disease of our modern age than previous societies. They have been able to study the physiology of human beings, and they see that stress has a very terrible effect on our heart. It has a negative effect on our adrenal systems. It obviously causes anxiety. It causes mental anguish. And the ways that we can reduce that stress are through simple diversions. The fresh smells, the sounds, the tastes, and the images of something new, of stepping back a number of times throughout the day, recharges us. So I want to encourage you every day to schedule time to enjoy these simple diversions. And the beautiful thing about most simple diversions, most of them can be free. They cost us absolutely nothing. To go out and participate in sports, take a little walk around your neighborhood, gardening, get your hands in the soil and dig and think of the beauty of nature in that way. Most of us have hobbies that we've always wanted to start, and many of us have had interest in areas and we've just never done it. It's areas that might be very fulfilling to us. Playing games with our loved ones or with friends. Reading, sitting down and reading a good book is a great simple diversion. Listening to music that we enjoy. Taking time out to watch a movie. Or writing. Some people are very gifted in writing and sitting down and taking the time to write. Meditation is a very powerful, simple diversion. And meditation is disciplined thinking. Meditation isn't daydreaming, where we just allow our minds to aimlessly wander from thought to thought, but meditation is disciplined thinking, where we say, this is something that I want to think about and meditate on, hopefully something positive, something stimulating, inspiring, and I'm going to take a little time to think about and focus on that item or that issue or that opportunity. Other things we can do is call a friend, share a meal with a loved one. Regular exercise is a simple diversion and also a great way to reduce stress in our lives. So simple diversions, taking time to stop and enjoy life and enjoy our loved ones and get off the merry-go-round of life that oftentimes just, forces us to inhibit the good things that we want to get out of life in an effort to just make money or in an effort to just achieve. And I'm all for having a good income. We're certainly all for achieving things, but if you do that at the expense of enjoying life, then you've really missed out on what life is all about. This ties in real well with principle number 9, which are meaningful relationships. Meaningful relationships are loving emotional connections. And we as human beings, we naturally want to love and we want to be loved. So meaningful relationships are an enriching and important part of human existence. Nothing provides a greater level of contentment or joy and purpose than to love another human being and to be loved. And again, I'm talking about it with either spouse or siblings or children or parents. Nothing provides a greater level of contentment in life than to love and to be loved. And I think it begins, and this comment was already made earlier today, it was in a particular individual's personal mission statement. Every day is a single gift. None of us are promised a tomorrow. So if you wake up every morning, and I have a personal affirmation tied to the fact, and it has the phrase in it that the day is a gift. If you wake up every morning, you realize that this is an endowment that you have been given. That endowment is called today, because none of us are promised to be here tomorrow. If you start off your day with that attitude and that perception, I believe that you will glean more out of that day than you would otherwise. So let your loved ones and let your friends know how much you value them, because it is a gift that you have, and they are a gift in your life. And we have to remember that to have meaningful relationships means that we have to make an investment in others to have meaningful relationships. If I have a certain amount of money and I want to grow it, I have to invest that money to grow that money. And if I have a relationship that I want to grow, that I want to nurture, I have to invest time. I have to invest some of my resources, and sometimes even invest some financial, taking someone out to lunch or buying them a gift. Sometimes we even have to invest financially in our relationships in order for them to grow and to be meaningful. But unfortunately, there are barriers to meaningful relationships, and these are the more common barriers that exist, that destroy relationships, that ultimately can make relationships toxic. One of them is selfishness, focusing on my needs. The attitude, it's all about me, it's I. That is very difficult in any relationship for the other party, and eventually it can cause bitterness and resentment when a person is trying to live with someone who is extremely selfish. Another is familiarity. In other words, taking someone for granted, just assuming that they will always be there. And when we take someone for granted, we usually begin to treat them unkindly. We usually begin to abuse them verbally or in other ways because we're taking them for granted. And that is not healthy to a relationship. Insecurity and fear are two other areas. And those are usually reflected in having trouble communicating, in trusting others, or sharing our thoughts, our feelings with another human being. And that usually goes back to experiences we had as children where we shut ourselves down and we closed ourselves up, and because of that, we have trouble communicating and trusting others. Another very difficult barrier, this is usually a problem of men more than women, and I have some clients that I do personal coaching with that suffer from chronic jerkism. I call chronic jerkism, it's kind of a catch-all phrase. It's a particular type of personality trait of a person who believes that they know it all, and they're usually very willing to tell you how much they know constantly. They usually have an opinion on everything. There isn't anything they're not knowledgeable on. And they also must always be right. They must always have the last word. That kind of a personality is very, very difficult to live with. That kind of a personality is difficult to have a meaningful relationship with. So that is another barrier to having a meaningful relationship. And then finally, a lack of forgiveness. Lack of forgiveness is when we hold on to hurts and the fact that we've been offended far, far too long, and that if we hold on to it and don't let go, that also will eventually lead to bitterness. And bitterness leads to resentment, and it is hard to have a meaningful relationship when you're bitter and you are resentful. So Being human means that we will offend other people, and just like we want their forgiveness for the mistakes that we make, the things that we say, the things that we do that might be uncaring or insensitive, we also have to be willing to forgive others if we want to have meaningful relationships in life. Very, very important principle of personal leadership. Now I'd like to give some final thoughts, and we'll have some assignments as we finish up this webinar. I'd like to introduce to you a concept. Some of you may be aware of it, perhaps not, but it's called servant leadership. And I think this is very important as we talk about personal leadership. It's a philosophy of leadership that I personally subscribe to, and many others do as well. As a matter of fact, it is, if you looked at the Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for, and they come out with that list every year, 50% of the companies listed in the Fortune magazine 100 best companies to work for use the philosophy of servant leadership. Now let me mention to you how you even get on the Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for. They send anonymous surveys to employees. In other words, the executive team can't vote for itself. The executive team can't fill out a piece of paper and say, oh, I think we are one of the 100 best companies to work for. Those companies chosen by Fortune magazines are chosen by the people who work for those companies, and not by the executives who just want to have a feather in their cap and appear to be such a great company. So it's meaningful when you are on Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for, and 50% of those subscribe to servant leadership. It totally changes how you lead and how you choose to influence others, in contrast to traditional leadership. Servant leaders first look to the needs of the people they are entrusted to serve. They ask themselves constantly, how can I help people to solve problems and to promote their personal development? Now, this is a big contrast to the leadership that most of us are used to in the Western world of command and control. And that leadership is, I'm an authority, the people under me are mindless little, trivial human beings, and their job is to do what I tell them to do. I'm the boss, they work for me. That is the traditional American command and control concept of leadership. The problem is that due to changes in Western civilization, it's no longer very effective. Frankly, it doesn't work. Servant leadership is a philosophy that when you understand it, when you grasp it, it changes how you lead and how you influence others in your family, in your business, in your community, in every area of your life. And here are some qualities of it. First of all, in servant leadership, the most important corporate asset no longer is the building. All right, it's no longer the corner office with the teak wood desk and gold leaf ceilings and the big windows that look out from the corner of the building out to the parking lot. The most important corporate asset becomes its people. Growing people is the highest priority, not building titles and building offices, trying to build prestige for the executive team. With servant leadership, you become a teacher and a source for knowledge, not a giver of directions. You look at your major role as being a coach, as a mentor, as being a problem solver for the people that work for you. You put yourself in their shoes. You ask what they need to be fulfilled and productive. And you motivate and inspire by being a coach and a mentor. You don't walk behind with a whip trying to beat everyone forward to do what you want them to do. You walk in front of them. You lead with a banner. Here's where we're going. Here's the desired future. Here's what we want to achieve, and this is good for all of us. Some other qualities of servant leadership is you consider everyone a partner and you share in the rewards. In the old days, they used to talk about the most important thing in a corporation were the shareholders. That meant people who had a financial investment in the company. That is no longer true. The most important people in a company are the stakeholders. Stakeholders are everyone who has a stake in the success of that company. That includes clients, customers, workers, vendors, as well as people that may have a financial interest. So everyone is considered a partner. With servant leadership, you have faith and trust in people. You allow them to rise to higher levels. Frankly, in an autocratic environment, if you're too talented, you usually will be resented because the boss usually feels threatened around people that are talented and skilled. Servant leaders don't have that problem. They're not shallow. They also don't live in constant fear that someone's going to take their job. Another quality is after you look at the facts with your head, you allow your heart to take a look also. So servant leaders are compassionate. They realize, yes, there is a need for organization. Yes, there is a need for policies. There is a need for procedures, but they don't allow what's written in black and white to overrule common sense and what their heart tells them. You have the ability to laugh at yourself. You have humility. It's not about your title. It's not about your office. It's not about how important you think you are. It's about serving and caring and helping other people grow. Another quality of servant leadership is that the followers love and respect you because you're a caring and genuine person, in contrast to an autocratic environment where followers are just expected to fear you or to respect you because you have a title. Also, servant leadership, you set high goals for yourself and inspire others by your commitment. You become a dreamer and a doer. Again, this is in contrast to autocratic organizations where usually there's one set of values for the executive team and then a higher set of values that everyone else in the company is expected to live by. And of course, they don't get the perks and the other benefits that the executive team does. With servant leadership, you balance fairness to an individual with fairness to the group. You make the hard decisions with compassion, and you make those decisions with kindness. So in conclusion here of this little discussion on servant leadership, and I spend a lot of time coaching and training corporations on moving from an autocratic model to servant leadership, and it usually has to start with the executive team because they have to model the right kind of philosophy, and that means they have to change, and that's where it usually starts. Servant leadership is an entirely different philosophy than we traditionally see in many companies, but the good news is that each year goes by, more and more organizations, more and more companies, and more families are developing a servant leadership model rather than the my way or the highway model of getting things done. Here are our assignments for webinar number 4, our final webinar. I'm going to ask you to read chapters 10 through 13 of Making Life's Puzzle Pieces Fit. And again, our class discussion next time will be what you gleaned from that may help you in your personal life or in your business. I'm going to ask you to create one new goal that supports your personal mission statement. We've completed the personal mission statement now. We've completed all 4 sections. Before we began the first webinar, I emailed to everyone something called a goal planning sheet. And we discussed the importance earlier of having shorter goals or stepping stones to achieve a major goal. I'm going to ask you to review the sample template that you received and to create one new goal of your very own that supports your personal mission statement. And I will ask you to tell us what that goal is next time. So we created the personal mission statement, and now we want to start by creating goal number 1 to support that personal mission statement. And then tomorrow I'm going to email to everyone a Locus of Control test scale. Earlier in the webinar, I spoke briefly about Locus of Control. It's a personality test, and it tells us whether we tend to feel if we are either in control of our lives or if there are circumstances beyond our control in life. And much like the circle of life told us a little bit about ourselves, this will also tell you a little bit about yourself. You will receive instructions on how to complete that, and we will discuss that next time. So next time we will have the class discussion on making life's puzzle pieces fit. We will talk about the new goal that you write to support your personal mission statement. We will talk about the Locus of Control test scale and what the results are. As always, if you have any questions, always feel free to call me or email me. Webinar number 4 will be next Monday at the same time. This will be the final webinar of the series next week. Final thought from Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And again, that was by Eleanor Roosevelt. Are there any questions before we wrap it up for the day? We have a couple of minutes if anyone has a question. None whatsoever. All right, everyone, be sure to have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to welcome all of you to seminar number 4. It is a beautiful morning here in Northern Ohio. We received a few inches of snow last night, so it's a winter wonderland, but being the most bizarre winter I can remember in my lifetime, Wednesday the high is supposed to be 60 degrees. So go figure. Nonetheless, it is great to have you with us today. Welcome to webinar number 4, which is our final webinar. We're going to be covering a lot of ground today, so we will go ahead and get started. This is webinar number 4, Know Yourself and Your Strengths and Weaknesses, which is the basic focus of the principles that, the remaining 3 principles that all of you were asked to review before the webinar today. As always, I like to give an agenda, so that's what we're going to do at this time. We will have an icebreaker, then we'll have a brief review of what we've learned so far. We will review our previous assignments, which were primarily focusing on the goal planning sheet. And we will have a class question, and then we will cover the last 3 of the 12 principles: Know Thyself, Passionately Positive, Embracing Your Spirituality, and some closing comments. So let's go ahead and begin here. How to get the most from the program. Prepare in advance for each class, complete any assignments given, and review materials. Actively participate in the webinars. Avoid distractions in doing other work, and of course respect the opinions and ideas of others. Learn, engage, and have some fun. So here's our icebreaker today of the 12 principles of personal leadership, and by now you should have had a chance to complete the book and read all of the 12 principles. The icebreaker today is, which one did you find to be the most thought-provoking or beneficial to you personally, and why? So looking at all of the 12 principles, which did you find to be most thought-provoking? Perhaps one that you hadn't thought of, or one that you didn't consider previously as being important in your life. Would anyone like to comment on that?
Hi, Greg. This is Mary.
Hi, Mary. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, good.
I'm going to say continuous education. I got a lot out of that puzzle piece, things that I hadn't really thought of before, and it gave me a lot to think about, definitely.
Well, I'm glad you found it helpful. Education is so important, especially in our culture today. There was an article yesterday in the Plain Dealer of some recent research done on primarily it was done on the white community, to be honest with you, but it showed that the difference in education, the tremendous effect that it has on solid marriages, on the crime rate, on lifetime income, and on another number of areas. And again, it just focused on the white population in the United States, but the great divide was on the amount of education that one had. So it was a very
Right.
thought-provoking article, again, in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I'm sure since it was a major study, it was published probably in most major newspapers throughout the United States. Anyone else have any comments on which of the 12 principles you may have thought to be rather thought-provoking? I see on here that Nick has connected. Hi, Nick. How are you doing this morning? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you,
Okay.
Nick. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I thought I would give you an opportunity to comment on this icebreaker.
Okay. Sorry, I was a little late getting on here.
Not a problem.
I'm going to say, I think it's going to have to go to within the last lesson of reading the last 3 chapters would be in the Know Thyself, and that is the perform a regular self-appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think that's pretty important because I think, we tend to just, go along and feel that we know kind of what our strengths and weaknesses are, but this, kind of reinforces that you need to really just take time and think about those and reevaluate, your strengths and weaknesses. So, I think, I think that's important to a little bit of reinforcement for myself.
Well, good. The thing is, too, that in knowing thyself, if we don't do an honest assessment of our weaknesses in particular, every once in a while we are going to find ourselves stumbling over the same problems or the same issues over and over and over again because we're living in denial. We haven't faced up to the fact that this is something that's a weakness for me as a person, and this is something that I struggle with, and in many cases it's also something that we grew up with, maybe witnessed in our own families that we picked up somewhere along the way. And if we don't know ourselves and make a serious effort to understand our weaknesses and make precautions against allowing those weaknesses to come back and get us, we'll just stumble over and over again and continue to have lots of problems. So good point. Okay, well, let's continue here, and we'll continue with the webinar, a review once again of what personal leadership is. You choose to seize control of your life and path, knowing that a default mission statement will take over if you do nothing. So we either make our own choices, or there is a culture and a society that has already made your choices for you. You create a game plan for life, you build a mission statement, and achieve active goals around that mission statement, and those goals help you to achieve and accomplish that mission. Okay, let's continue. Principle number 1, this is just a very quick review of the principles. You may have noticed that I do it in every webinar. And the reason we do it is that repetition, spaced repetition particularly, is how we learn things. A lot of folks think that when they hear something for the first time that they've absorbed it, that they've learned it, and that's not necessarily true. Think something as simple as learning the letter A when you were a child, when you were a lot younger. You learned about the letter A because the teacher had the letter A hanging on the wall probably. The teacher had the letter A wrote it on the blackboard. You opened up a book and the letter A was inside that book. Your teacher had you write the letter A. It was through spaced repetition is the way that we learn new concepts and new ideas in life. So that's why I tend every webinar to go through the principles that we have already covered, but we will do them quickly. Number 1, the right visionary goals. These are written goals that are necessary to provide a blueprint for our future. We learned that short-term goals are the stepping stones to achieving long-term goals. We learned the importance of vision, that mental picture that prods and motivates us, and we learned that creating positive affirmations is a form of vision and something that we should use every day. We talked about the importance of having a personal mission statement. During the early part of the webinars, we worked on all 4 parts of the personal mission statement. Then we went into principle number 2, continuous education. It gives us the knowledge and wisdom to reach our goals. It provides oftentimes credibility and credentials that we need for our careers. It helps us to maintain those goals and accomplishments once we've been successful. It develops our mind and our body and our personality, makes life more rewarding, more fulfilling, and it guides you to be proactive and to form your own opinions and values rather than just those that we hear on the media. Then we talked about maintaining our health. Whatever we have, we need to take care of, and we all have different levels of health. Many of us have chronic diseases and things that we struggle with, but we need to take care and maintain what we have. It's hard to be successful if you're not feeling well. And we talked about the importance of a good diet, a regular exercise routine, drinking plenty of water, and certainly getting enough sleep and rest. Principle number 4 was driving forward. And that was defined as a personal mission and a vision that fuels our desire to have forward momentum in our lives, to get to the goals that we want to get to. It's the ability to push ourselves through difficult situations. I like to say the ability to wind our own clock. It's an example that others will see who are around you in your family, in your community, in your workplace, that will encourage and motivate them to join your cause. And driving forward is not constantly looking into the past to relive negative events and experiences, because there's seriously nothing to be gained by doing that. Principle number 5 is utilizing our resources. We all have mental agility. We have creativity. Most of the time we haven't even tapped into the potential that exists within our minds. And we discussed acquiring out-of-the-box thinking, asking what if, being open-minded to new information. Using physical resources, our own physical energy, which is another reason why we want to have good health. There will be periods of time when we'll be through a lot of stress, when we might have to log in extra hours to get difficult projects done. We need good health to do that. It's the ability to respond quickly using technological tools that are at our advantage here in the 21st century. Studying research, looking at history to find out how things have been handled in the past, similar situations. We learned about our resources and network. We all have acquired friends throughout the years who have a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge in areas that we don't. Former coworkers, a mentor, business groups that we may belong to. And we talked about the ability to leverage our personal strengths and even our own weaknesses, much like you may remember the story of Phyllis Diller in the book, how she was able to make a very lucrative career with humor about her own physical features. Principle number 6, dealing with disappointments. We all experience disappointments in life, but we talked about the key is that time has a way of turning a lot of perceived failures and disappointments into successes. So be patient. Take a long-term perspective on life. View things in the long term, not from right now, because right now is always incomplete. It's a distorted view. We discussed that personal struggle and overcoming self-doubt, which we all have during certain periods of time, is actually a fertilizer for achievement. Usually this occurs just before a breakthrough occurs in our lives. We talked about taking a mental break if you're being discouraged or disappointed. Do some things you enjoy, and certainly do some good and positive things for other people, because it'll help you to get your mind off of yourself. Principle number 7, a definition which we thought was very perceptive about our lives, even though this is regarding any form of balance, a state in which various elements form a satisfying and harmonious whole, and nothing is out of proportion or unduly emphasized at the expense of the rest. And that's important because we tend to nurture or tolerate our own destructive behaviors. And if we acquire addictions, that's an unbalanced life that's going to pull us down. Obsessions are another issue that human beings tend to have, spending too much time or money or thought on any one thing. And the bad thing about our own destructive behaviors, including our obsessions or our addictions, is after a period of time, it becomes in our minds the accepted norm. We forget what it's like to be any other way. So it becomes acceptable to us, and that is very destructive and can hurt our lives. And we also emphasize the fact that we have limited human resources. And because our human resources, our emotions, our time, our physical strength and endurance is limited, we have to use it wisely and effectively and to avoid addictions and abuses. Principle number 8 was the importance of simple diversions. We were created to have our minds recreated on a regular basis. Don't become so busy achieving that you forget to stop and smell the roses to enjoy and savor the wonders of this life. Simple diversions should be positive. They should be in harmony with our morals and our values. We should take time out every day, including in our breaks and lunch and after work, to make sure that we get out and experience other sensations and smells and sights and sounds, and get away from work and get away from the office to make sure that our mind is refreshed with those new things. Certainly take our scheduled breaks and our vacations. Principle number 9, meaningful relationships. A loving emotional connection is part of a basic human want and need. We all need that. Nothing provides a greater level of contentment and joy and purpose in life than to love someone and to be loved. We emphasize the fact that every day is a single gift. Those of you that may have been reading the news recently may have known about a shooting that occurred at Chardon High School, which isn't too far away from where I'm located. I'm actually in southwest of Cleveland. But one thing the principal told the students there when they were gathering together to mourn the loss of their fellow students who unfortunately were murdered, he told the parents, make sure you go home and hug your kids today, because he in essence said every day is a single gift. Make sure you spend the time to love those who are important to you, and that's a part of this very important principle. Let your loved ones and your friends know how much you value them. And to remember, you must make an investment in others to have meaningful relationships. If you don't make that investment of time, that relationship is going to become strained and frayed, and eventually you won't have a meaningful relationship. Here were our assignments for webinar number 4. I'd like to spend some time on this today. We were asked to read chapters 10 through 13 to finish the book, to create one new goal that supports your personal mission statement, which you worked on during the first 3 of the webinars. You were encouraged to use the goal planning sheet provided to you earlier, and you had been given a sample template when the program began. So I want to just stop right there and ask any of you if you would like to volunteer to give me an idea of how well you did on your goal planning sheet. If you started with one goal, just one goal was all that we asked, something that would support your personal mission statement. Is there someone who would like to comment on that? Don't be shy.
Greg, this is Debbie Ray. I started with one goal.
Okay, great.
It's a kind of what I would consider a bigger, lofty goal.
Okay, great.
So I kind of started it just to break it down a little bit. And I really started working on, how I was going to achieve it, and looked at a couple of the things that I thought were obstacles, obviously, to my achieving that goal. And really, actually been working on it for the last week. I've kind of started doing a schedule of items that I know I need to complete in order to get to this goal.
Okay. Well, let me emphasize, we'll go through the form here real quick, and I'll emphasize why all of these parts are important. The beautiful thing about using this goal planning sheet is that this will make sure that you have a SMART goal. I know it takes a few minutes and it takes a little work to use the goal planning sheet, but if we use it effectively, it will create a goal that is really meaningful and is a SMART goal. As you're probably familiar with the template, the first part of it is the actual goal statement. But then we need motivation. And the next section asks us the benefits. It wants us to clarify what benefits we're going to achieve by achieving that goal, and also what loss we may want to avoid. So this is good for us to clarify in our minds why this goal is very important to us, and how we're going to be hurt personally if we don't achieve this goal or make an effort to achieve it. And then the next section are obstacles, and we're all going to run into obstacles, and the idea of this is that we in advance write down possible solutions. If we've really taken that principle seriously, know thyself, we know that we tend either to procrastinate or we may be good at making excuses on why we don't do things. We may be able to convince ourselves through a negative self-talk that we can't do things. We may know we're not very good with time management. So with this area of the goal planning sheet does is it helps you to clarify in advance the kind of obstacles that you know you're going to run into that are going to attempt to stop you from achieving this goal. And then you write the possible solutions. Sometimes the solutions are just making sure that a close friend or loved one knows that you're working on this goal, because they'll help to hold you accountable. Every once in a while when you have lunch or you have a phone call or whatever, they'll say, how are you doing on that goal that you set? Have you met your achievements last week that you wanted to do? That's one reason a mentor can be so good for all of us as we're going through these things. But the possible solutions are in advance of what we create and realize that we may need because of the obstacles that will come in our path to try to stop us from achieving that goal. Then the next part of it, of course, are what we've been calling all along the stepping stones, or the smaller specific action steps that are needed for achieving this particular goal that we've set. And this gives you the ability to break it down into a number of easily digestible steps. Don't ever forget the statement, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And over a period of time, you will consume that elephant in the same way with a huge goal. And this is not only true in your personal life, but true in your business or true in your department. If you have something that you're trying to initiate in your business that is really big, like maybe a new business system, or maybe the organization is being changed structurally with new people and new positions or new roles, if you break it down into specific action steps, you can make it easy to achieve even the most complex personal or corporate goal. The next area asks you who needs to know about this goal. Again, this is all about accountability. And if you have a personal goal and it's something you're struggling with, let your significant other or a close friend or a close relative or someone to make them aware of what you're trying to do, a change that you're trying to make in your life. And if you ask the right person, they'll be very encouraging. Yes, they'll hold us accountable. At times they may, so to speak, hold our feet to the fire if we're not living up to what we said we would do, but that's a good thing. They hopefully will encourage us, and just knowing that we have to answer to someone else for a goal that we've written, it can be a strong motivator for some people. Then the method of tracking the progress, whether it is a chart, whether it is just a list and we check off particular days, whatever method it may be, it's very good to have some way of knowing how we're doing. You don't know in a football game, the way that you know you're winning or you're losing is you keep score. And you track progress on your goals because that's your way of knowing that you're keeping score, how you're doing. And then a couple of very important statements as you continue to work through that. Does this goal support your values? And if it does, that's great. It must. Otherwise, it's not going to motivate you long enough to complete it. Or even if you do complete it, it might be destructive. Is it worth the time, the effort, and the money to reach this goal? Your answer to that certainly should be yes as well. If it's no or not at this time, it's probably not the goal you should be working on at this moment. And then the affirmations, going all the way back to our earlier webinar, how important affirmations are to overcome the negative self-talk that we have. And the affirmations that you can write will support the achievement of that goal. And they should be repeated at least once a day, preferably in the morning. And if it's something you're really struggling with, when you take a break in the mid-morning or mid-afternoon, step away from your desk and go out and say those affirmations in your mind to yourself in the evening if necessary. And then there's other forms of visualization. You can use pictures of what you want to achieve and hang them on a wall. Post-it notes with inspirational statements you can attach to your PC monitor, or a number of things that you can do to encourage yourself. You can change your PC wallpaper. perhaps to remind you of that goal or something that is very important to you. And the point that I wanted to emphasize with this goal planning sheet for all of you is that it is a powerful tool. And any goal that you set for yourself, for your life, or for your business, even for your department, if you use this goal planning sheet, you'll be well on your way to having a real goal that is not only written but is clarified and can give you every advantage in achieving that particular goal. So that's what that was all about. Anyone like to make any comments about maybe an issue that you faced or a challenge or a success that you had in working on your own goal planning sheet? Any comments at all? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Another assignment we had was the locus of control. Hopefully all of you had a chance to work on that. This is the test scale right here. Now I will email this to you so you don't have to rapidly try to write these down, but here's the key. The key is that you were asked a series of questions and asked to choose between A and B. And what you see here on the screen are items in which you would give yourself 1 point for if you chose any of these particular answers from 2A to 3B to 4B. There were some questions in there that were plants. They were not even intended to be scored. They were intended to neutralize biases. But the key to this, the locus of control, and again, I will send you a copy of this scoring key. The key is something we wanted to emphasize going all the way back to the first webinar. And on this, the higher the score you have, meaning the higher number of points for each one that you chose that were in concert with that scoring sheet, the higher the score, the more external locus of control. Again, a strong external means that we say to ourselves, what happens in my life is due to time and chance, and there's very little control that I have over events. The lower the score, meaning the fewer number of points that you achieve, shows a strong internal locus of control. And with that personality trait, we tend to say to ourselves that I believe that I can control or modify events that occur in my life. I can change or modify or solve the problems that occur in my life. Now, when this was given to corporate business executives, where individuals were known to be problem solvers and known to face some pretty difficult challenges in the corporate business world, their average score was 8.29. So when I send you a copy of the scoring sheet and you take a look at how you come out, remember that anything over 8.29 shows a stronger external compared to a corporate business executive, meaning you don't think you have a lot of control over things. If you have an average score, if your is less than 8.29, obviously, you don't have an average, you're going to either be 8 or 9. But if your score comes out, say, under 8, then it shows that you have an even stronger internal locus of control. So you believe that you can control or modify events or problems. I've given this in the past. I've given the locus of control test to individuals before webinars that are similar to what I've been given. And then when we went through all of these discussions, I gave those tests again. And it was incredible how just through discussion and through studying these principles and so on, that people's locus of control became far more strong internally, that they grew to believe more than they had previously that they could literally change or control events in their lives, that they could make life better, that they could solve problems in the workplace, that they could have families that were happier and more fulfilling. And so the goal is to have obviously a strong internal locus of control as a personality trait. So that's what that was about. And this was just another tool intended to help you to do a self-evaluation as you continue to tweak your personal mission statement and work on your goals. Okay, here's the class question for today. The class question: What was the most valuable idea or concept you gleaned from chapters 10 through 13 of Making Life's Puzzle Pieces Fit? And how can you apply that lesson to your business? Someone like to comment on that? I am sure we have someone who would like to comment on that.
Greg, this is Mary.
Yes, Mary. Thank you for commenting on that. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. These chapters were great. I especially liked, let's see, I got my book here. I guess it was even the end when we were putting it all together and you were recapping, and just the paragraph or the sentence, when you know you're loved and accepted by the Supreme Creator of the universe, it is possible to accomplish anything. And that was a very powerful statement.
Okay, very good. We'll look at, a little later, we'll look at one historical example of a person who had very strong spirituality, and we'll look at a business leader whose entire product line, and he literally changed the world through his products. We'll see how that was influenced by his own spirituality. So, good comment. Thank you for that. Anyone else like to comment on anything, concept that they may have gleaned from chapters 10 through 13 of Making Life's Puzzle Pieces Fit?
Greg, this is Debbie Ray. I particularly liked, and it helped me revisit something that I had done in a previous life, when we were talking a little bit about the analogy from the automobile and how we decide how to go forward for a day, for the day. And that ties back to, in my previous life, we had talked about fish philosophy and choosing your attitude every day.
Right.
I think that's pretty powerful. I think it's important to get caught up in, you know, how things maybe, as the day progresses, how things maybe aren't going the way you wanted them to, or, you know, I mean, I think we all get challenged every day. You know, we have a plan for the day, and we have a calendar, and we've got things that we want to get accomplished, and those things tend to fall by the wayside as we get caught up in what goes on in business. But, you know, I think that if you sit down in the morning and decide that this is how your day is going to go, that, you know, that tends to stick with you, and that you remember at the end of the day that, you know, you plan on having a good day, you had a good day. I mean, okay, you got a little distracted by the things that happened, but, you know, in the end it was productive, and you accomplished a lot. So I like that particular piece too.
Very good. And that's another reason why it's good, if particularly if we're struggling with attitude or we're struggling with our perception in life, again, why those positive affirmations are so helpful, because if we notice ourselves slipping, we can go out at lunch and we can just get into a, you know, quiet corner of a building, or while we're eating lunch, we can close our eyes for a minute or so and just repeat a positive affirmation that affirms our desire to be positive and to look at things from a productive and beneficial point of view, always looking at the glass as half full. So that's another reason why those positive affirmations are so essential. And again, it is a choice. If there is a default mission statement for us, and if we wake up in the morning and we don't choose to be positive, we don't choose to look in the bright side of events and the opportunities that are there before us, then something else is going to kick in that is going to make us negative. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is turn on the morning news. And within 3 minutes, just listen to the kind of things that they will be emphasizing and that they will be reporting. And virtually every one of those will be negative. Every one of those will be an effort to pull us down. So that's why that's so essential. Anyone else like to comment on the class question? Okay, we will move on. We're going to now take a look at the final 3 principles. Principle number 10 is know thyself. We are all a mixture of good and bad qualities. We are human beings. All of us possess good, and we possess some very bad qualities inside ourselves. And that's one reason why it is important to have good values, to have a good value system, because that is what regulates our behavior. When our values are internalized, They say to us, nope, don't do that. Nope, that is not in concert with what you believe. And it is a regulator. It helps us to make sure that we don't do something that is destructive to ourselves or to others. So it's important, understanding that it is important to learn both of our strengths and our weaknesses, because that will serve us very, very well. To a certain degree, we all live in a world of denial. And the problem with denial, particularly with our own weaknesses, is it's just a way of excusing our bad behavior. And only when we confront our bad behavior, when we are mature enough to look at ourselves as a complete whole and realize that I do have good qualities, but I also have some weaknesses, and we begin to understand that and focus on that, can we have a breakthrough, and we can begin to regulate our behavior a little bit more effectively. One of the ways that we do that is to listen to criticism closely. Now, when I say that, I don't mean someone, frankly, who is being a jerk and just trying to hurt us. And sadly, we will run into people like that in our lifetime. But I mean people that we respect, or even within our own family, if they make a comment to us, oftentimes there is an element of truth. Of course, in the book we talked about the fact that Lincoln was called a fool. Abraham Lincoln was called a fool by his Secretary of State, and what a remarkable response it is. He said, well, if I respect this man highly, I better look into this, was Lincoln's basic response. And even when somebody says something humor, it is true, that old catchphrase, much truth is spoken in jest. Over the years, my own children sometimes would tease me about qualities or things that I would say, or qualities that I would have, and there is much truth spoken in jest. If you look at it honestly and closely in a respectful way, they were trying to say, this is an obvious weakness you have, and you need to work on it. You need to modify it, because it's very detectable. It's very noticeable. So it's part of it is being humble enough to listen to criticism, constructive criticism, closely. Because oftentimes when someone gives us criticism, I would venture to say that maybe 50% of it, perhaps even more, is not valid. But there will be a nugget, an element of truth in criticism that we receive, particularly from loved ones. So rather than just excusing it, rather than just denying it, rather than just getting angry, growth can occur in our lives when we take that time and examine ourselves and get to know ourselves. It's important to acknowledge your capabilities and your personal pitfalls. And when we know what our pitfalls are, just that knowledge alone, combined with our values, can help us to guard against very destructive behaviors. Again, this is pretty mature level of human existence we're talking about. This is the self-actualization area of life that we're talking about. Very few people ever get to this level. They would just prefer to live in denial, and the old catchphrase that, denial is not just a river in Egypt. And we don't want to live in denial. We want to be very cognizant of both of our strengths and our weaknesses to make sure that life can be productive and that we can achieve all that we possibly can. So when you discover weaknesses about yourself, develop goals to address those weaknesses. You certainly don't want them to cause you to stumble and not reach your personal mission statement. If they're serious, if it is an addiction, if it is an obsession, if it is a personality trait that frankly is very detrimental to you and to your loved ones, please get professional help. There's no shame in needing to get professional help. I always encourage everyone to discover a great passion that inspires and motivates you. And rather than be willing to die for it, better yet, for the human race and for the people who love you, be willing to live for it, whatever that great passion is that you discover in life. It may be a hobby, it may be a cause, it may be achieving something, but whatever it is, be willing to live for it. Knowing this self means that we understand that growth comes from reinventing ourselves. We don't have to remain the way we are. As I mentioned in a previous webinar, frankly, we are not stagnating. We really are either going forward or we're going backward. There is no middle ground. And growth comes from reinventing ourselves. We do that daily through the use of new positive affirmations, and as you achieve things and you accomplish those things through positive affirmations, then change your affirmations to work on a new goal, to work on a new area of life. But stagnation, just not going forward, comes from accepting the way things are. Progress only comes when we're willing to reinvent ourselves. This means a regular self-appraisal and a yearly personal evaluation is essential to our growth and achievement. And that's part of knowing thyself, being honest, being candid with our own strengths and our own weaknesses, because taking the time to do that will take us again to a whole new level. Principle number 11, passionately positive. I'm going to give you an observation that I've noticed in life. I have known a lot of average, let me reword that. I've known mediocre people with mediocre talents, but who had a positive approach to life. I have seen them achieve great things. Start businesses and they became successful. Start in the community, serving their community, and the next thing you knew they were chairman of a nonprofit association, or they had achieved great things because they focused on possibilities. But the reverse is also true. I have known people who had far more talent than I will ever have. Very gifted, incredibly brilliant people. But because their attitudes were so negative, because they made everyone around them sickened because of their personality or their judgmentalism, or they could never be satisfied, or it was never good enough. Because of their traits, they were complete failures. Even though they were extremely talented, they were extremely gifted, they always focused on what couldn't be done. They always focused on obstacles instead of on possibilities. So being passionately positive can make all the difference in the world, and that is a choice. We can choose to be positive or to be negative, because it is true, perception is reality. What we believe in our minds is reality to us, within our heads. And that's why when you're looking at that glass, it's either half full or half empty. A few weeks ago, I heard an engineer say to me that, and this was his reality. See, he was an engineer. He says some people look at the glass and say it's half full. Some say it's half empty. He says, as an engineer, I look at the glass and I ask, why is the glass twice as large as it needs to be? So you see, perception is reality depending on where you're coming from. And we can determine to reprogram our thinking. We do not have to live with the kind of thinking that we have today. We really don't. It can change. So here's one question before I go on to the next slide. What are some ways that you think that we can use to reprogram our thinking? Considering what we've covered in the webinars and covered in the book, what are some of the ways that you can think of that we could literally reprogram our thinking? Any comments on that?
This is Mary.
Yes, Mary.
I think just, like having every morning a positive, a saying that you keep saying over and over again helps you. Like I have a website that gives me, positive sayings every morning, and I think it helps start the day and helps me to choose to be positive.
Good. Very good. Yeah, I have a friend, I can't think of the name of it now, but I have a friend who on his iPad has an app, and every day the app provides for him in his inbox a positive motivational saying. So that kind of ties in with that. Good comment. Thank you. Anyone else?
You're welcome.
No one else? All right. We'll just look at a few examples. The first one ties in a little bit here with what Mary was saying. Obviously, we've talked about the power that is behind positive self-affirmations. Start the morning with one. Start the day with gratitude, not an attitude of entitlement, but gratitude, and start the day expecting the best. Another thing that we can do is associate and socialize with positive can-do people. Now, we certainly should be friendly and kind with everyone. But again, who we socialize with, who we develop in our network of close friends is a choice. Don't allow time and chance to decide that for you. And if we associate and we socialize with people who are can-do in their own attitudes, in their own frame of mind, then that certainly can help us tremendously. Seize control of the negative cultural messages that surround us every day. And that's just a catchphrase for meaning, for much of it, turn it off. If the news, the daily news and television is pulling you down, start listening to something else. If the newspaper is pulling you down, just read the first paragraph and don't get into all the nitty-gritty voyeuristic details of every dysfunction that exists in our society. As much as possible, surround yourself, again, these are all choices, with positive music. Whatever music inspires you, and music is very personal, but whatever music motivates and inspires you, surround yourself with that. The same with reading material. Surround yourself with reading material that when you close that book, when you close that reading material, you either feel more knowledgeable or you feel inspired, encouraged, or motivated. But if that reading material is pulling down our thoughts and attitudes and making us negative, giving us an attitude of victimization or entitlement or those kinds of traits that our culture is emphasizing so much today, then that's not very good for us. That's not a good thing. So be careful of the reading material. Television. With cable television, we have a gazillion choices today what we're going to fill our minds with. And just fill your minds. Again, TV programming can be, some of it can be very inspiring, very educational, very motivating. Be careful and make the choice of what you want to watch in TV. Our hobbies can be very fulfilling. We can have hobbies that can enlighten us, that can give us a whole network of new friends and people to know. So that can also help us to become passionately positive and reinforce that quality in our life. Any comments on being passionately positive on that particular principle? Okay, principle number 12. Embrace your spirituality. There actually are two sides to human life. We are all familiar with IQ, that's basic intelligence that can be tested. But there's another side to existence, and that's the spiritual quotient. And this is the non-physical aspects of reality. And what this does is when we combine our IQ and our SQ together, it provides an added stereoscopic dimension to life and to existence. Because virtually everything in life has expanded perception, perspective, and meaning when we have SQ. It also helps us to understand and deal with personal tragedy and personal loss to a much greater degree than we would if we did not have SQ. A recent example would be the terrible tornadoes that ravaged a part of our country last week, Indiana, Kentucky. I believe there have been 30-something people, sadly, who died as the effects of those tornadoes. But it's inspiring to see the interview of some people because they had SQ, how they are able to cope with the loss of a loved one. Here's a tragedy, here's a deep personal loss, and having a spiritual quotient in their lives has given them an added dimension to deal with those very difficult issues. Spirituality honors forces or a presence that is greater than ourselves. And this has historically led to some remarkable people to achieve life-changing events, political freedoms, medical breakthroughs, scientific discoveries. I would venture to say that virtually every major advancement in human civilization has been due to people who had a very strong connection with their own spirituality. Now, don't confuse spirituality with a religious belief. It's fine to have a religious belief. I certainly do. But a religious belief is different than spirituality. A religious belief is an institutionalized system that's grounded in certain practices or dogmas. It's interesting that survey after survey after survey shows, for example, that Americans, they want their political leaders to have a deep sense of spirituality. But what they don't want them to do is emphasize their own particular religion, whether it be Catholic or Mormon or whatever their own particular religion is. People find that very uncomfortable. However, they do want their leaders to have a deep sense of spirituality and an understanding and a respect for a presence that is greater than themselves, that they believe is guiding the affairs of mankind. So having SQ actually can affect all the other 11 principles we have discussed, and it can change our perspective of each and every one of them. It can also change our values. And we live in a world today that it is not politically correct for people to express their degree of spirituality. And I understand that, and that is part of our world. But I think we need to understand that people of deep spirituality have significant influence on our culture. I'm just going to give you two here. For the sake of time, I could list many, many, many more, but I'm just, in my lifetime, I'm going to list one individual who, due to his spirituality, had significant political and social influence, and even though I did not agree with 100% of his political philosophy, and then we'll look at an example from the business world. The first one is Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was not, like many of our founding fathers, I might add, was not religious in an open sense. As a matter of fact, he rarely went to church, and sometimes during his presidency he was criticized for that. But he had a deep feeling, a deep spirituality that was often reflected in his speeches and in his statements, in which he believed personally that the United States was a very special nation, that democracy and the whole concept of personal freedom guided by democracy made the United States accountable for its conduct and responsible to expand human freedoms throughout the world. He instituted a number of things that eventually brought down the Soviet Union. And again, even though he was not an outwardly religious man in our modern sense, he was a man who was guided and directed by deep spiritual principles, believing that America was a city on a hill, that America was a unique nation in human history, that it was divine providence that founded the American Republic, and that it had a role in the world to promote human freedom for each and every individual on every continent of this planet. And that spirituality was reflected in the way that he conducted his life and in the way that he acted as President of the United States. Again, he was not a perfect man, as none of us are. He had political views that I'm sure some of us may not agree with, but his spirituality affected him in a very powerful way. Now we'll take a look at a business example. In a business example, Steve Jobs literally changed the world. Single-handedly, he helped create a number of entirely new industries. And I might add that I have never owned an Apple product, so I don't want you to think that I'm, pro-Apple, or I'm saying these things because I love Apple products. I've never owned one. But here's the key. The key is that Steve Jobs was deeply influenced by his spirituality from Buddhism. And every time you see an Apple product and you see the organic design and you see the simplicity of it and you see the elegance and the beauty of an Apple product, that was driven by this businessman's own spirituality, to the point that he was a perfectionist and oftentimes didn't get along with people who worked with him. But nonetheless, he changed the world. The designs and concepts of his products literally changed the world. It will never be the same again because of the spirituality that influenced and drove his life and the products that he created. Now, are there any on the principles that we've covered before? I cover some final thoughts and comments on that last principle number 12 on spirituality. Any comments or questions anyone has on that? Okay, let's go through a few final thoughts and comments. Here's what we have covered through this webinar. I want to reinforce some very important concepts. Life is a journey, and that we can live it on purpose if we take the time and the effort to live by establishing our own personal mission statement. So I encourage you to live life on purpose. Make those choices. To do that, we have to write goals. We have to have written goals. They help us to accomplish that personal mission statement. Short-term goals are the stepping stones to achieving great long-term overall accomplishments. Goals, in order to be effective, have to be SMART goals. And if you use the goal planning sheet for any kind of goal in your life or your business, you will find that it gives you an advantage in achieving your goals and making your dreams come true. We also covered other vital principles that help us make the most out of that personal mission. They provided qualities like an ongoing quest for knowledge, something we should desire our entire lives, striving for maintaining vibrant health, being as healthy as we can be. Again, that's a choice to a big part, making sure we eat the right foods, having exercise, doing the things we can do, getting good medical care. Making those decisions can make a difference in our lives. A forward-thinking approach, not living in the past, not looking backward, but looking forward. Resourcefulness, realizing we have incredible creativity inside each and every one of us to solve our own problems. Boldly facing our doubts. We'll all go through periods of life in which we will have self-doubt, in which we will be discouraged, and understanding how we can work our way through that and taking a long-term view of life and what we're trying to accomplish. The need for work-life balance, balancing life. Life is like a dance, and we have to make sure that we are in step and that we have balance in everything that we do. Proper recreation, which can also be redefined as recreation, to recreate our minds, to look at our lives in a healthy aspect, to take that time out to stop and smell the roses and to develop the things that we need to have a fulfilling and again, a balanced life. Relationship building. Relationships are so important to our lives. They add a lot of rich meaning to our existence. So build those relationships. Candid self-analysis, looking at our strengths and our weaknesses, having a positive mindset, and of course, nurturing our own spirituality. So where do we go from here? Well, here's where I encourage you to go from here, and the purpose of these 4 webinars was to teach you the basics of the 12 principles of personal leadership. You have the book to fall back on. You have a number of handouts that you were given. You have all the tools you need except desire. All the tools that you need to build your own personal mission statement and to accomplish incredible things. So continue creating your goals using that goal planning sheet. Make sure your goals support your personal mission statement in all 4 vital areas that we covered in building that mission statement. Remember, regarding the goal planning sheet, the same format can be used to create business goals for your company or for your department. Always feel free to use it. It is a good tool. Rather than work on too many goals at the same time, I encourage you to create a master goal list and reserve some for the future. I suggest that people work on no more than 3 or 4 goals maximum at the same time. Some other goals, maybe some hobbies that you want to develop, or a really large goal you may put on your master goal list and put it off for a year or 2. Having too many goals to work on at the same time dilutes our efforts and oftentimes can cause a lot of frustration in our lives. So work on the right number of goals for you, and don't work on too many at the same time. Create a master list and put them on it. Regularly review your progress in 2 important ways. Read your mission statement at least monthly, particularly if you have a bad day or you're going through something that's extremely stressful, then pick that mission statement off the wall, and I encourage you again in your own home, in your own office, to put it on your wall as a reminder of who and what you are. Read it once a month at least. And then once a year, do an annual review of your progress. Tweak your personal mission statement. Your life will change and grow and mature, and that's a good thing, and that should also be reflected in your personal mission statement. Look at your low importance payoff activities in your life and reevaluate what is really important to you. One of the reasons so many of us are stressed is we continue to hang on to low importance payoff activities that have outlived their purpose in our lives. Discuss your goals and mission statement with your loved ones. They will help you to identify the low importance payoff activities. It's amazing. Sometimes they recognize it before we're willing to recognize that we are doing things that no longer have meaning to us. Sometimes we're doing these things thinking they're important to our loved ones, and when we discuss that with them, they say, it isn't important to me at all. Why are you continuing to do that, Mom or Dad? So take a look at those low importance payoff activities and talk to your family about them. It's also good to have someone who will hold us accountable for our goals. If you get off track, and at times everyone gets off track, just reboot the next day and start over again. If you go a week and you notice, hey, I stopped using my personal affirmations, I haven't looked at my goals at all recently, I haven't done the things that I know I need to do, well, again, remember that you are driving forward. You're not looking back in regret. So if you get off track, simply reboot. Tomorrow's another day, and tomorrow is a gift and an opportunity to start fresh all over again and to get back on track. So feel free to do that. If you have any questions, you know where I am. I'm going to be emailing out to all of you a survey for your input and evaluation of this webinar series, because I'm always trying to make it better. Everyone who responds to the survey will receive something that I've compiled over the last 10 years. It is my own list of my favorite 300 quotations. And anyone who responds to that survey will receive those 300 quotations just as a thank you for your comments. And that email will also include the score sheet for your locus of control. So, are there any final questions? If not, I will leave you with two final thoughts. The first one from Victor Hugo. There is one thing stronger than all the armies in the world, an idea whose hour has come. My friends, your hour has come. You now have all the tools that you need to build your own personal mission statement and to achieve incredible things in your life and in your business, in your career, and in your home, and I encourage you to do it. And finally, Helen Keller, who said, one can never consent to creep when one feels an impulse to soar. All of you have the ability to soar to new heights in your life, to achieve many great and wonderful things. And in parting, I encourage all of you to do just that. Thanks a million. I appreciate you attending the webinar. God bless all of you, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
You
Thank
betcha.
you, Greg.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.